It's no surprise to any climber that strong fingers really are helpful for our sport. The question is, what's the optimal way to get strong fingers? The reality behind that is there isn't a best way, there's just a whole bunch of options. In this video, we're going to go through and talk about what I call recruitment pulls in order to get high levels of strength in the finger flexors. The first thing that we want to consider when talking about recruitment pulls is, what is recruitment in the first place? One of the questionably non-arguable principles of exercise physiology is the Henneman size principle. That's essentially what this graph with the circles represents. At the bottom, the circles are smaller. At the top, the circles are larger. Those circles represent motor units, which is essentially muscle fibers and the different types of muscle fibers and how big they actually are. The ones at the top, they can produce the most force. They can produce force very quickly. The ones at the bottom, they don't produce very much force and they produce force a little bit less quickly. So in order to get strong fingers, we need to get high levels of recruitment. On the left-hand side, I put some numbers here because when we do something like a recruitment pull, it doesn't always have to be maximum effort. We could do a 55%, 75%, or maximum effort recruitment pull. Notice how I stopped the numbers at 85. That's probably because it's really hard, if possible at all, to get 100% recruitment in any particular muscle for an athlete. So in this context, it's going to be about trying as hard as you can when we're getting high levels of recruitment. Something very important to consider is that this increase in motor unit recruitment is a neurologic process. That means we can get stronger without having to get bigger muscle fibers. In fact, there's a limit to how big these muscles, the finger flexors, can actually get because they're just not that big in the first place. So we don't really need to worry about getting exponentially larger muscles by doing things that are really high intensity. The next thing to consider is that recruitment takes time. And then I usually ask people, it takes time, but how much time? Does it take 10 seconds? Does it take 7 seconds? Does it take 5 seconds? From the testing that I've done on myself and a lot of athletes, usually people can hit their peak force in their finger flexors in around 1.5 seconds on average. For people that have done this particular training intervention and they're used to measuring their force, bringing the force on more slowly actually allows more force production. That's because this particular principle, the Henneman size principle, takes time to build high levels of recruitment. Essentially, it takes time to send a big signal from your brain down your spinal cord out to your finger flexors over a given movement of exercise. One of the things that we're going to demonstrate in this video is how to actually measure recruitment pulls. In this context, we use the maximum value or the peak force to demonstrate higher levels of recruitment over a period of time. Certainly in the acute setting, at the beginning of a session and towards the end of a session, we might see an elevation of force. That's mostly a neurologic process. We're getting better at the movement. We're getting more coordinated at grabbing on and pulling as hard as we can. Another thing to consider is this particular movement is more concentric-like. You can see below here, I wrote their Henneman size principle and or recruitment is very contraction mode specific. So we're going to do something that is more like a concentric muscle contraction. If you were doing a typical weighted hang on a fingerboard, that's going to be more eccentric-like, which is more of a load that you can tolerate. The mechanisms behind that is because you're loading connective tissues a bit more easily when you're doing something that's lengthening under tension like an eccentric contraction. The reality is, as a rock climber, we use both types of muscle contractions. We latch onto things and pull into position, and we also hit things and hang on while we move and adjust our feet. Doing both of these is usually what I recommend athletes do, both for the variation in their training, but also to provide a little bit different of an adaptation for individual contraction types. Remember, one is not better than the other, they're just different, and a lot of times having both of those can shore up that little extra percentage of strength that we're looking for. One of the things that I like the most about recruitment pulls is their simplicity. I like the idea that I don't need to add weight to my body. I like the idea that I can do this anywhere, that I have an edge to perform some level of effort on. If we compare that to a weighted hang protocol, we need to find a specific edge and we need to have some sort of external load to add to the body. One of the things that's really difficult for athletes to understand is when they need to add more weight, when they need to back off adding weight, when they need to discontinue sets. One of the things that we're going to show with this video today, I'm going to show you how to perform recruitment pulls, and I'm also going to show you how you can use those to auto-regulate how long your finger training session is. If you have a method to measure peak force production, all we're going to do is hit that peak force every individual set until we see a drop in that force. A drop in force at that time demonstrates a loss of strength, therefore accumulation of fatigue. That should be a pretty good time to discontinue that particular training session. Now that you have a little bit of an introductory on what recruitment pulls are, let's go ahead and demonstrate how to do them. For the example of this video, and to have better lighting, I put it into a bolt into my climbing wall, and in order to not lift my body off the ground, which some of your athletes will do that, I'm putting a weight on my hips to make sure that I can stay against the chair. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the efforts on my right and my left side. To do this, I'm using a custom-made 25mm tension block, which is the typical size of edge I prescribe for most people to train their fingers on. We're going to do a 5-second countdown because the G-Strength portal has that 5-second countdown built into it. Then I'm going to bring the force on slow, pull as hard as I can. So let's see what happens. As a caveat, obviously I've warmed up really good. I've been climbing and I did my fingerboarding warm up for approximately 40 minutes. Now I'm ready to try hard. We're going to do the left arm first, and it's going to count down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it. So that would demonstrate a maximum effort recruitment pull. The force on the left side was 170.9. I put in my body weight, which is 165. And let's do the right side. Capture in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Force on the right side was 167, 3 pounds less. One of the cool things about a tool like this, the portal, is it gives me the maximum load already with both arms, and it also gives me an estimated hang weight. So the 2-arm sum for me during that pull was 338.7 pounds of force. That would put my peak hang weight, if I was going off my peak number, at plus 173 pounds. Obviously, I would not hang with 173 pounds on my body. That's one of the reasons why the recruitment pull is so simple, is it takes away an individual's need to add a bunch of load to their body, because most climbers' fingers are pretty damn strong just by the amount of volume they do with their climb. One of the coolest things about having a measuring device and performing sets like this is it's really fun to compete against yourself. So I took a 60-second, 90-second rest. Now we're going to repeat that effort, see if I can beat my numbers. As you can see with this, we're getting the objective feedback. It's giving us good input as to whether the effort was good, maybe I'm getting tired, etc. This is typically how I have a lot of my clients auto-regulate their strength training with recruitment pulls, by actually tracking the numbers, watching how they adapt over a couple weeks of time, and then watching when they hit a plateau, and that would suggest that we need to switch up the training stimulus. So let's go ahead and do a left arm recruitment pull again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That one definitely, in my mind, felt like it was a little bit higher, because now I'm demonstrating that I'm getting more recruitment. That one was 173. So not significant, but definitely tried a little bit harder on that effort. So my right arm, the first pull was 167. So let's see if I can hit 170. And let's go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That one was 173. So that made me tired. So I think I was wrong. I was 178 on the left. So that was 8 pounds more. I didn't clear the other one. And that was 173. So that put my 2-arm sum to 351. My estimated peak load was plus 186. Again, we're not going to use the peak hang weights necessarily, that doesn't make sense, but we really care about that high level of recruitment. So let's shoot another one. I'll do a third set, and then I'll bring a close-up on the video screen so you can see what it looks like to slowly build recruitment to a peak force. For example, we're going to do the same thing, except I'm going to let you all see the slow increase in force build over that 5-second effort. I'll make sure I wait until it is at 0, the countdown, before I start pulling, so we can visualize what recruitment looks like in real time. So we're going to start a left arm pull in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So we can see here, it takes time to generate force. Again, like I mentioned during the intro, I'm pretty familiar with doing this as a training intervention, so this slow ramp of force is a way that I can make sure I get more recruitment instead of grabbing on and pulling very quickly. That one I was a bit distracted, but the force was lower, 173, compared to the set number 2, which was 178. So let's go ahead and repeat that same thing on the right side. My best yet was 173. Let's see if we can beat that. And we're going to capture in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. You can see that one, sharp increase in force. Because I had to kind of stand up to get on the edge, it was hard to reach at full extension, so I pulled a little harder. That one topped out at 179. So as a demonstration, that's actually good, showing that my right arm still hasn't hit that peak recruitment for today. So what we would do is we would continue to do sets until my force is plateaued around 170. Typically with recruitment pulls, I give people the top set number as 10. I don't know that there's really good reason to do more than 10 in an individual session because that's plenty of a stimulus to get good strength gains. Hopefully this video gives you a more clear understanding of what recruitment pulls are, the physiology behind them, and how to actually perform them. The other question that I get often is when to perform them. Typically, if it's going to be a strength training phase, when the goal is not performance, I tend to have people do them 2 to 3 times per week, up to 10 sets in a given session, usually separate from your climbing training. That could be later in the day, separated by 4 to 6 hours, or that could be with any sort of supplemental strength training because they're pretty simple to perform anywhere. If you're an athlete that's in season, recruitment pulls tend to work as the final primer or warm-up on your fingers before you get on your project. If you're warming up with a no-hang device, flashboard, tension block, something else that has less of a hard surface to it, you want to make sure you pick an appropriate edge size. If you're doing hard boulders, you want the edge size to be small. Make sure you're generally warmed up, then do maybe 2 or 3 maximum effort recruitment pulls like we demonstrated, separated with 90 seconds between or 2 minutes between before you get on your project. In that example, the goal is to make sure you're getting high levels of recruitment before you expect to use high levels of recruitment on your particular project. In the next video, we're going to talk a bit different about strength and velocity, because even though I'm getting a high level of recruitment with this particular exercise, that's still too slow to be really specific for sports performance. So typically, if we're in a sports performance phase and it's not about building strength, we would use a slightly different training intervention, and I call those velocity hangs. That will be the next video. If you have any questions about this, leave them below. We'll get to them as soon as we can.